My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasangran, Guru Piran Nyo, fellow Nyanis. So today I'm going to continue with the Mahan's teachings on sound. And I covered the last time on the sound. I'm just going to recap. Swamiji speaks about sound or vibration. So in many scriptures, they talk about divine rhythm or resonance, and you hear all these different names, different characterization. And here Swamiji, speaks as though they are all the same thing. And he says that pulsation causes vibrations, and I spoke about what causes pulsation, how the eye, results in, vibrations and pulsations. And Swamiji then speaks about vibrations causes waves, and waves causes sound, and everything that exists in this universe, forms, exists or cease to exist due to sound. So this vibration is really important. You see that the birth of, a star, a galaxy, planets, even all biological beings, everything in this universe has a resonance or vibration or sound. And it forms, it sustains for a while, and it also dissolves, all on that frequency. So again, I spoke about the link between the eye and, here Swamiji characterizes, the diffusion of the eye, the primordial, atom and the primordial, substratum, which he calls I, diffusion of that is thought. And that's, so the first principle is the principle of I that he speaks about in his I God book. And that I is, you see in the teachings of Mahan, he speaks about both the big I and the small I. And here he's referring to that infinite potential and possibilities that is part and parcel of this material universe. And we spoke about how the I, he characterizes the I, and the full characterization is in principle 1 that I covered some time back. And the diffusion of the I is thought, that is principle 2, that we also covered the different aspects of thought, how through thought everything emanates, and of course, it is the cornerstone and building block of our universe, including our own existence. And the pulsation of the I is what Swamiji calls energy, or in this context, sound, and that is what we are. And the sound is the fundamental resonance for everything in this universe. Without sound, the universe does not exist. There is a whole physics behind why the sound of resonance is there, the way how our material universe emanated. You have the push, pull, weak forces. All these manifest, as sound. And we went on to say how this energy or sound, which makes up our own physical body, our physical body is part and parcel of that energy or the vibration. And that vibration essentially leads to thoughts, and if you see that, our brain is an interesting, apparatus that essentially, resonates, and that gives rise to thought, which is a measure of experience. And we see that there is a very strong connection between that physical entity in the form of quantum energy that essentially gives rise to thought. So we see the body is made of matter, water, fire, air, and space. And the sixth element is essentially consciousness. And we see that, this material body in the form of energy, has an impact on thought and vibrations. And the same thing we see that, if our body is not healthy, if our body is weak, we see that has an impact on thought. The thoughts that we generate if our body has got the vigor and it has an impact on our thought processes. And if we are impacted in this material world in various ways, and our brain generates and our body generates all kinds of hormones, that has an impact on our thought processes. So there is a very nice link between energy and thought, or the sound or the vibration that we generate. Similarly, if we're able to generate very calm and cool, vibrations and thoughts, we see that our experience of this material world becomes more and more subtle. So we have a frequency, every human beings and every being has a frequency that we operate. And we see that, that frequency depends, the ability to cognize that frequency depends very much on how cognize the vibration or the sound, depends very much on how well our mind is in terms of being aware of the thought, and if our thoughts are very volatile and uncertain and troubled, we see that the ability to cognize our own strength and subtle power within us becomes more challenging. And a good example is that when we are angry, we see that our ability to understand things become more difficult. Our ability to harness the forces within us becomes more challenging. And similarly, we see that as we become more calm and cool and a sense of quietude, we see that we're able to, cognize more subtle forces within all of us, subtle vibrations in all of us. So again, and so much so that when the thought is so peaceful and calm, you're able to touch the most subtlest vibration or sound, which is the sound of absolute silence. So again, we see that there is an interconnectivity between the energy that we possess, the infinite potential and possibilities, and the thought processes. The more calmer and the more cooler and the more sublime our thoughts are, we see that we get a sense of clarity. We have a sense of, when clarity comes, we're able to cognize and understand things better. So we see that interplay is crucial in understanding not just our thought processes, but also we as a material being, as a spiritual being, and how we see our beingness in the context of the entire universe. So there is a strong link between this. When this link is weak, we are unable to understand the inner strength, the inner sanctity, the inner universal peace sanctuary in all of us. So as that becomes very strong, we see that as the thought and the forces, understanding the forces within us becomes strong, we see that our understanding of that I in us becomes more stronger, and we realize that that strength between linking the convergence between the thought and the forces within us reveals who is the generator or the one that manifests as thought and energy, and we see that we have a better understanding of that I within all of us. And as that continues, we see that that reinforces one another, and we see that the I, the vulnerable, the thought all becomes one. There is this sense of oneness. There is no separation. Whereas when the thought and the energy is not very well linked, we see our body as separate from what we are thinking and what we are experiencing, and we are unable to connect back to our own true reality. But when this link becomes strong and reinforces day by day, hour by hour, second by second, we see that we actually feel the presence and an awareness of this infinite potential, that big I that Swamiji is speaking about, that universal vibration that emanates within us. And this is what Swamiji says here, the wisdom jnana without rules without character, without morality, regulation, and codes of conduct is like house having no locks or bolts for its doors. What this means is that he is touching this notion of transcendentality, right? When you become transcendental, you become transcendental to this. Wisdom means you are aware of everything that is happening and who you are as a being. If you are a being of this material being that most people uh, assume to be, then you're caught up with all the forces of this material world, the laws of karma. Karma here is cause and effect, right and wrong, sukha and dukkha, what we call, you're caught up in this world of dvandvas, the duality of what is right and wrong, what is good and bad, white and black, all those different things, morality, character, this person is good, that person is bad. All these things start dissipating. And you see that, whether it's the saint or the sinner, you see them as the same. Whether it's the pauper or the prince, you see them as one. Because you don't see them physically or because of their material status. In spirit, they are all one. So if the spirit is transcendental to materiality, then it has to be transcendental to all the regulation and the codes of conduct that we have characterized as Homo sapiens, or what is right and wrong. And, we do that because we want to ensure that our material existence, people follow the rules of law, so that there is, social harmony. But if you are transcendental, you have attained that universal peace, then for you, all of them, the sukha, dukkha, all these are one. Circumstances may be very different, but you are transcendental to these laws of nature. Nature here is essentially this material, universe that we speak about, that is caught up in this, that has these forces of karma. Or karma here is not past life and future life, but it's the cause and effect. So this is why you see that Swami speaks about when one attains that jnana, you are transcendental to your body. You are transcendental to your race and religion. You are transcendental to the home you live in, the physical home, or the biological bonds that you have. All these you become transcendental. And here he's explaining this, that when you come to that state, you actually live a very liberated life. Though you are participating, you are not impacted by it. Though you are experiencing this material world, you are not having any expectations, but you learn to accept everything. So he says this state is somewhat like a house with no locks and bolts. Why does he say this? And if you think very carefully, every home has bolt and locks. And you ask why that bolt and locks are there in the homes, is because we think that we own the home. We are the only one that have exclusive rights to our home. Hence, nobody else should come to our home unless they are invited or unless that we know them, and so on. So we put all the bolts and locks and the security system to prevent thieves and bandits and other things, other people, including animals and other things, from coming into our home and invading our space. So here he says that, if you look at this very carefully, if you are transcendental to all these things, are you ever impacted by people who have, negative thoughts and bandits and all those things? Not really, So he says that your house becomes free, that anybody can come and go, anybody can partake in it, anybody can, visit it, whether invited or uninvited. That is the transcendental quality that, he's speaking about. He's speaking about not only that, I should gain from my experience and only my biological family should gain from this. He says that a Jnana Vallal is one who is Vallal means that this notion of an unconditional love and kindness, and your house becomes a home without bolts and locks that prevents people from coming in. Anybody can partake. And this is what the spirit is. If we see from a spirit perspective, the spiritual perspective takes that all of us in spirit are one. So why should we have locks and keys to prevent one another from understanding who we are? In the material sense, we have that because we see ourselves separate. And in the separation, we see that ownership is separate. But here Swami is speaking about when you understand this, we don't own anything. The material world has its own dynamics, but the spirit is universal. It does not need ownership of anything. It is that. So he says that, it is not bound by any material rules and laws and characteristics and personalities. It is transcendental to this. That's what transcendental means. So here he says that there is no restrictions, no, your mind becomes light. There's no heaviness. There is no, this things that drags you. When your mind is light, it becomes frictionless. And that's what gives you this. Nothing prevents you, nothing impacts you. And that frictionless, the light mind, is what we call the enlightened mind. So here he's speaking about how this thought processes that one harnesses through our own inner strength reveals that infinite potential and possibility that is transcendental to material rules, character, morality, regulation, codes of conduct, somewhat like a house without any boundaries or locks or keys that prevents people from partaking in it. So again, there is a beautiful story that is told to me, and you can read this in the story of Valmiki Maharishi. And Valmiki was a dacoit, and he used to rob people. And in this context, anybody that passes through the forest, he will stop them and steal things from them, sometimes beat them up. And so here they had 7 Maharishis coming through, and Valmiki Maharishi stopped them and asked them, look, I want to steal things from you. And the Maharishis are so happy that, great, that we are looking for somebody who will come and steal our treasure. And Valmiki was very surprised because most people would be very, very upset, want to run away. But here these people are embracing. And he says, what kind of treasure you have? He says, we have treasure of wisdom, knowledge that we want to share. And we want to share this. And nobody, as soon as we want to share, everybody starts leaving. So, and he was puzzled by this. And the whole process then is that the Maharishis will partake with him the wisdom, knowledge of what he's doing and acquiring all this material wealth in not a good way. What he should acquire is this material wealth that no matter how much you partake in it, you will get more and more of it. And ultimately, this dacoit called Ratnakar ultimately attained self-realization. He gave up his limitedness and started meditating intensively on this notion of partaking in this jnana. And ultimately, many years passed, and the anthill grew on him. The anthill in Sanskrit is called Valmigam. And when he came out of that anthill, people who saw him come out call him Valmiki Maharishi. And so the story here is that, for a saint, for an enlightened one, everybody is equal. So again, this is what Swamiji is trying to say. Our thought processes become more and more universal. We don't discriminate against, good and bad people. There's no such thing as good and bad people. In the spirit, we are all one. There may be circumstances that they are, committing certain things that make them, unillumined. Unillumined, sometimes it's called sin, living a sinful life. But in essence, they are all pure. So again, this is what in this explanation Swami is giving. And here again, a more scientific approach of this sound is that Nikola Tesla says that if you want to find secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And in that same notion that if you want to discover who you are, this is why it starts with the mind that is, not caught up by the material vibration, but goes back to the base vibration, the base frequency that give rise to everything in this universe. And it all is in the form of energy, frequency, and vibration. I want to come back to, most people think, well, how does this all operate? And I think I posted some interesting experiments on to show you how water, and I'll speak about water quality. Water is like molecules. At different frequency, it gives different shapes and different characteristics. So, and you can click on this YouTube to see this, and you'll be able to pick this up in our WhatsApp group. At different frequency, the water gives you different characteristics. In that same way, the different frequency that emanates in our mind gives us different characteristics. If our mind is so caught up with frequency that is very turbulent and so on, our life will be very turbulent. Similarly, if the frequency is more sublime, more graceful, more, have a sense of quietude, our mind will also be in that same way, that, the mind is not preoccupied or wasting its energy on frivolous things. And the mind starts building strong neural networks. It does not waste its energy, very deep and strong neural networks that enables efficient flow of information that gives us great clarity on many, many things and knowledge, including the knowledge of the self, including the knowledge of this material world, and including the knowledge of God, this infinite potential and possibilities. These complex ideas can only be understood and the secrets of them deciphered if our mind is able to build deep and broad neural pathways so that the flow of information becomes deeper and stronger for us to be able to understand things. If our bandwidth is weak, the level of complexity that we can uncover becomes more challenging. And the other important thing also is that as we, create this sublime vibration through introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, this deep and prolonged neural pathways gives us another important quality called, or generates something called neurogenesis. That means that as we age, our neural connectivity dies like any other cell. But as we utilize them, it starts rejuvenating and growing much more deeper. Even how old you are, as you get older, the connectivity becomes more and more stronger, and you see that you don't lose your youth, because the youth is not determined by the body, but it's determined by the mindset. And if the mindset is inspired, the mindset is creative, the mindset is has all the vitality, you see that the body also dovetails with that. So again, here it shows that a different frequency, as water changes its character, different frequency of our mind gives us different characteristics and personalities, including the ability to attain that God-realized personality. So here a little bit more, there are a lot of scientific work. This is a paper that was published recently in a top journal called Frontiers of Neuroscience. Again, it clearly shows us that that when our mind is resonating in different frequency, the type of music that we listen, the type of harmony that we create in our mind, we see that Swamiji spoke about how we expand that gray matter as we start, meditating, introspecting, not just listening to music from sublime music, sublime vibration, but generating that music and the harmony within ourselves, we see that, our frontal lobe, increases its gray matter. What does that mean? That means that we're building more neural highways in there that helps us to, enhance our executive functions. We're able to react very quickly. Our motor coordination, our speech, all those improves is very, very, that's why we see that, and we see that our ability to think, that's why this part of the brain is so important, right? Similarly, we see that, our ability to listen, the temporal lobe on the side, our ability to listen becomes better because we have better neural connectivity and passing of information. We also see that, ability to, our memory becomes better, ability to, access that information. So our mind becomes like a solid library that is resourced with all the experiences, and that impacts our emotions because we can draw on to examples and draw on to experiences on how we reacted to different circumstances. Similarly, we see that, our parietal lobe, which is right up here, as our neural connectivity becomes more and more stronger, we see our ability to feel things, our ability to process things, and, attention becomes better. And the same thing we see that, in the center part where, when we do the third stage initiation where we build very strong gray matter there, we see that, our ability to the sensory perception, our motor coordination, our ability to plan, and also reward perception. So, you don't crave for material things, and you have this, Swamiji says, summa irkum sukham, that blissful, joyful experience that one attains. And similarly, we see that, other parts of the brain becomes more and more well connected. So the ability to react to things, the ability to be agile, the ability to listen and observe things carefully, the ability to analyze, the ability to make sense, and the ability to be aware of our own, inner strength, all becomes much more stronger through this introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation that enables us to listen to the harmony, beautiful harmony from outside, but more importantly, the beautiful harmony that resonates within us and, projects outward in terms of the resonation. So we see that, this sound that is emanating within us, this Unarva Swamiji speaks about, gives this a much more sublime, a much more greater clarity, and a sense of calm and coolness in us. So we see this whole process of introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation helps us to harness that inner vibration in all of us that gives us the strong connectivity between the thoughts that we generate, the forces that we generate, the forces that we are aware of within ourselves, and also greater understanding of our being, ourself, that we call I did this, I that did that, that I-ness becomes more and more clearer. And this is what Swamiji says very clearly. When you understand this, he says that, one prays and prays, but without understanding. Through this process, you understand what this prayer is. And you understand that the prayer is not about the external world. The prayer comes from within ourselves, the inner, vibration or the inner rhythm or the Bhagavan's Gita, And when we find this divine vibration, you see that divine vibration exists everywhere. You are the center of that, right? You are the epicenter of that vibration. And he says that when you find that prayer as sound, as vibration, he says, what is that to pray? You are the prayer. You see? And this is the beautiful part, that whatever we start from within ourselves, we see resonating everywhere. So this is the essence of Mahan's teachings here. So to bring in context, we see that, that every day spending some quiet time to experience that divine vibration in all of us will strengthen our thought processes, you know, through the thought processes, we strengthen our intellect, our ability to reason, ability to analyze, the ability to understand the forces within all of us and unlock that great inner power within all of us, which Swamiji calls the universal peace sanctuary, which has infinite potential and possibilities. So listen to the self very, very carefully. Always allocate some time for yourself to listen to the self, because the self is what gives us that silent, that expansion, that liberation, and that finality. Sandosha.